The 1968 discovery of a mysterious brass device in the Hudson River led to the purchase of a 12th century document that chronicles discoveries under the Templar mount during the First Crusade. Documents recovered led to a Templar voyage to recover first century scrolls in North America in the 1178 to 80. Well, this all leads to today's topic, Cryptic Code of the Templar in America. The one and only Scott Wolter is back. You might know him as the TV personality of the Travel Channel's hit show Americans Unearthed, and his history of investigating authenticated the Kensington Runestone, which led Scott to write several books about the subject. Today we talk to Scott about his upcoming workshop at the Conscious Life Expo, coming up Saturday, February 8th, and it's always a great time when Scott joins Truth Be Told. I'm Tony Sweet with Captain Ron. Please welcome to the studio, Scott Wolter. Welcome, Scott.
Well, thank you, guys. You can tell the crowd. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
A lot of big in-studio audience today.
Well,
I know.
And,
but anyway, hey, thanks, guys. I appreciate it, and glad to be here. And I think I'm not just excited to be here, but I think in a few days I'm going to have an opportunity to meet you guys in person.
For the first time after like 3 or 4 times you've been on the show and a couple, 2 or 3 years we've had you on.
Conscious Life Expo.
Yeah, finally we get to meet Scott in person. And
well, I hope you're not disappointed.
No, please. You can't be any uglier than we are. I'll tell you that right now. But
well, you know what I look like. Everybody knows what I look like. So what you see is what you get, and if you don't like it, tough up.
Thank God I know Photoshop. But Ron said I could say this, that you are seriously one of our favorite guests, because when you're on the show, like Linda Moulton Howe and a few others, that you really bring your research, and we love research, we love truth, and that's why we have the show Truth Be Told.
Right, we share the same reason for doing this, because
Right.
he's also driven just because he genuinely wants to get to the truth, which is great.
Exactly, and that's why the first time I ever saw American Unearthed, oh my God, it blew my mind. Yep. It was my favorite show. So this coming Friday and Saturday, and even Sunday, you're gonna be at Conscious Life Expo. But we want to talk about your new book, Cryptic Code of the Templar in America. And I know you're going to be touching on this also at Conscious Life Expo. What led you to write this? Because there's a lot of new information in this book.
Yeah, there is. And well, it's just a continuation of the research we've been doing now for 20 years, that started, as you mentioned at the start of the show, with the Kensington Runestone. And, it's been really an incredible journey that just continues. I mean, even since I published this book, I've got a lot more stuff that has come forward, and other stuff that we've been working on behind the scenes that we didn't present in this book because it would have been just too much. But what started off as, authenticating the Kensington Runestone from a scientific standpoint, from the geology of the stone. And what I like to say is, rocks have never lied to me.
Right.
Rocks don't have egos. They don't have agendas. They just are. So I believe them. I trust them. I don't trust some people. And, really, that may not sound nice to say, but sadly, it's the truth. And, over this 20-year journey that I've been on, I've had difficulty. Where I've run into difficulty has been with the human condition. I guess that's the best way to put it. So I've relied on the rock and the rocks, and they've never let me down. But one of the things that also happened, and this is really what led to ultimately me writing the next 3 books, including Cryptic Code, was one of the obvious things that is a net result of the runestone being authentic, and that is that somebody carved it. They came from some place, and they came here for some reason. Those are absolutely universal truths. The question is, what are the answers, right? And that's really what I've been trying to figure out over the course of these 20 years. And I got to tell you guys, I think I know what the answer is. I just need to make sure that we have a rock solid and hopefully bulletproof case to prove it, and we are well on our way there.
And that's what I love, because most people would just speculate, and that would be their truth. And that's what I love about what you do, is you do not speculate. You wait till you get, hard facts.
And let me just jump in here real quick, Scott. It is true, though, that a lot of people disagree with your conclusions about the Kensington Runestone. Isn't that true?
Well, and that's absolutely true. And, if a lot of people don't realize that I've been doing material forensics for an awfully long time. I hate to think about what the number is, but it's about 35 years. And, I understand the scientific process, the scientific method pretty well, because it's what I do all day, every day for that long. So I really do understand the process. And in my job, I have to make a call when and only when I have enough evidence to be able to do that. And sometimes people don't like the answer that we get. Well, you know what? When there's a trial, some people are going to be happy, some people are not going to be happy. Right. That's just the way it goes. You know what? The Super Bowl was a great game, but somebody lost and somebody won, and that's just the way it is. And that's fine when it comes to the Kensington Runestone. And if you don't want to accept my results, that's your prerogative, okay? But if you want to be serious about it and you want to challenge me or ask questions, or you want to say, hey, Scott, I think you've made a mistake, that's fine too. And look, I'm not perfect. I'm not above making mistakes. And I'll tell you what, if you can point out a mistake that I've made, please do, and I'll fix it. But that's not what the issue is. The issue is they just don't like the results. Well, tough op, baby.
Well, Scott, I have a big question for you. So, to me, just like the Robert Schoch stuff, we both love him as well. Your stuff,
yeah, Robert's great. I love his work.
Me too. And you guys, to me, have laid out your case. You don't jump the gun. You don't make these crazy assumptions. You've been studying this for 20 years, and you come to your conclusions. And when I hear you say it, I'm like, okay, I agree. This, like you say, that geology is a hard science. Why can't we get the top 5 geologists in the world to look at this, see the facts, the science, and go, yes, that's clearly the fact, done? Why is it still so challenged and speculated? It should be. I thought science comes to an answer. It feels like this is all faith.
First off, there have been a number of geologists that have looked at this work, and they agree with me. And beyond that, I'm not the first guy to look at the Kensington Runestone geologically. The first guy to do it was the first state geologist of Minnesota, Newton H. Winchell. And he looked at the stone in 1908 and 1909, and he came to the conclusion emphatically that it was authentic, that the weathering was old, and therefore it was authentic. So there are a lot of people that want to give me credit for solving the Kensington Runestone, and I'm not the guy that did that. Newton Winchell did it 90 years before me, okay? But when I started to do my work, I knew who Newton Winchell was, absolutely. Everybody in Minnesota learns about Newton Winchell if you're studying geology. But what I didn't know is that he had studied the Kensington Runestone. I had no idea. And it wasn't until after I had reached my own conclusion that I found out that Winchell had also studied the stone. And to be honest with you, I was nervous at first because I thought, oh, God, what if he came to a different conclusion? Well, he didn't. And actually, the truth of the matter is all I've done is replicate independently what he already did. So I'm the guy that really checked somebody else's work previously. Now, I took it a lot further. I've got better microscopes. I've got access to scanning electron microscopy, 3D imaging, and all that. But at the end of the day, we basically did the same thing and reached the same conclusion. And I'm confident that anybody else that looks at the stone geologically who's competent and honest about it is going to reach the same conclusion again.
Now, when we watch. I remember one of my favorite movies was National Treasure, and a lot of times when these hunters or scientists, they look at the same, let's say, rock, Kensington Runestone, for 25 years, and then they finally find one thing that they missed. Have you found any new discovery on the stone itself that you did not see before, or that might something like a light bulb went off and linked you to something new?
Oh, well, from the standpoint of new things that we've discovered on the stone? Absolutely, and it just continues to reveal more and more information. Of course, you have to have what we say in Freemasonry is the signs, symbols, and tokens,
right.
And you have to understand what those are so that you know what to look for, right? For a long time, I didn't know that. And I was looking at it purely from a physical standpoint and, from a practical standpoint. But there's many layers to the Kensington runestone because the person that carved it was an initiated Cistercian monk who had been educated in a lot of different things, not just how to carve runes and
right.
and carve a message, because there's a lot of things that I found early on when I did my scientific work and my microscopic work that I had no idea what they were. These strange dots and extra strokes that were added, to the runes and in open spaces within the runes that I had no idea what they were. And it took collaboration with linguists and runologists from Scandinavia and the United States to be able to interpret what those were. But I was the first one to ever see them and to document them. And they're very subtle, but they're very clear once you know what you're looking at. And of course, being a geologist, I could tell the difference between, a spall in the rock or a flaked mineral versus something that was clearly man-made. And so finding those marks was one thing. Figuring out what they meant, that took years, and that's still happening now. And in fact, we've revealed some new. We still have some new things to reveal yet. But really, all it's doing, guys, is just putting more tick marks on the authenticity side. And really, at this point, we got nothing on the other side. And if you think about it scientifically, how can there possibly be evidence to support a forgery if that's not what it is?
Right.
It's interesting
and that's not what it is. So we don't have anything on that side. The one thing that was there was a linguistic problem was solved when I found a couple of dots that changed what was a modern Swedish word to an old Swedish word. I didn't know that. I was just the first one to identify the dots. So it's basically about 100 to 0 right now. And good luck. If you don't like the runestone, bring the evidence, but I don't think we're ever going to see it.
I've been a fan of this for 20 years. I mean, I remember being on the old Coast show back in the... So it's interesting how this thing that was such a big part of your life, still 20-some years later, it still ties into what you're dealing with now.
Right.
You just brought up that movie, National Treasure, that adventure of chasing all that.
Yeah.
This new book you have is just like that movie. It could be a film.
Maybe this will be a
Oh,
film.
man. You know what? And you're right, because I when I think about this book and when I was reviewing it and I was going through everything, it's like, how do I put this in order? What is, how do I tell this story of all this stuff and these revelations? There's like 3 or 4 really big revelations in here that easily could be the focus of a book all by themselves, right?
And their synchronicities.
Well, they're all tied together, as they must be if we're on the right track.
Right, which validates each one that preceded it. Right. Every time you find a new one, if it matches the previous information, it further validates those findings.
Well, 100%. You hit the nail on the head. It all has to fit. It all has to fit. There can't be any outliers or a piece of data hanging out there that doesn't fit, because if there is, you're not there yet. And really, with this book, what's happening is all these pieces are starting to fit. The outliers are falling into place, what we thought were outliers. And I will tell you this, guys, I am working on the next book. And that one is going to pull together a lot of whatever loose threads might be in this book. You don't even realize what the loose threads are because you don't have the background information that obviously I have yet. But the next book is going to be... It's really going to be cryptic code on steroids.
One thing you're very open about, when you were doing America's Unearthed, that you did a piece on the Masons, and then you end up joining the club. You joined the Freemasons, and so and there was a question in the chat room, and this same goes for myself too. joining, and you can tell me, you can't discuss it, but
No. You can. I'll answer any question you want to ask me.
But
what is the fastest land mammal?
I think he was number 10 on the Kansas City Chiefs.
Right?
last
Yeah,
night.
right.
Right.
Tyreek Hill. So
Right,
fast,
right.
Tyreek Hill, he was amazing.
It
Holy
was
cow.
amazing. That was a great game. But did joining the Masons, did that help you do a lot of research for the Kensington Runestone?
Absolutely, 100%. And the thing is that before I became a Mason, and I should probably back up and just give you a little bit of history.
Please.
My dad drowned in an drowning accident when I was in my early 20s, and I happened to be with him, and it was a really tough thing.
Sure.
I won't kid around about that, but the day after he died, they cut off this ring he always wore on his finger, and they gave it to me. And I looked at it, and I saw this curved sword with a 5-pointed star. And I'm like, what the hell is this thing? So I went home, and eventually I asked my mom. I said, what is this? She said, well, your dad was drowned in an accident. Pardon me?
Oh, no, we had a little feedback. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I was like, anyway, so I asked her, and she said he was a Shriner. I said, well, what's a Shriner? She said, oh, he was a Freemason. I go, oh, what the hell's a Freemason? And my mom really couldn't tell me. And so I knew that he was a Mason, and I kind of remember seeing a little bit of stuff. I remember seeing his fez hat, but that was about it, and I didn't have any interest. And, I was a young guy and just getting my career started, so I got tangled up in that, and then I got married and had kids, and, it just was never something that I really spent much, it never came up until the Kensington Runestone. And then as I began to dig deeper into the, who carved it, where'd they come from, and why questions, that was when I started dovetailing, and the Masons came up, right? And eventually the Knights Templar, and is there a connection between the two? And those are the questions that I was investigating, and I knew that if I was going to try to get answers, I would have to approach these people, and I did that. And it was 10 years before I became a Mason, probably five years into the research at that time. And they were so welcoming, and they just said, sure. But the funny part was, there were a few Masons. In fact, there was one guy who used to show up at my talks that I would give around the cities after, compelling new evidence came out, the first big book, that I did with Dick Nielsen. But I would do talks around the Twin Cities here, and there was this one guy that kept showing up, and he would always sit in the back. And I remember one time, about the third time he came, I went up to him, and I introduced myself. I said, who are you? And he said, well, my name's Mark Campbell. And I said, are you a Freemason? And he laughed, and he said, yes, I am. I said, are you guys watching me? And he said, yes, we are. And I said, well, how am I doing? He goes, pretty good.
Wow.
So anyway, and then Mark was the one that invited me to come to the Scottish Rite Temple and go into their library, which was amazing. And, there's things that are in that library that you won't find anywhere else. And they were really, really helpful, and they were very open, and the more I dug into Freemasonry, the more I got to know these guys, the more and then I thought about my father, and I thought, I was convinced by the evidence that this was something I wanted to be part of and support. And so I joined. And one of the things is if you've read the book, is because I became a Mason and I finally allowed myself to receive new information and learning in a different way that I had never experienced before. I had an epiphany when I went through one of the York Rite degrees that was a direct connection to the Kensington Runestone that absolutely decoded it, if you will, for me to realize that most of the inscription is allegorical. It's not to be taken literally. For example, there are no 10 dead men. That's an allegorical reference to something that happens in one of these degrees. And really that was a profound moment and a profound discovery. And all I can tell you is it's led to more that I haven't published yet. So stay tuned. But at the end of the day, Freemasonry is absolutely part of the Kensington Runestone. And if I had not become a Mason, I never would have discovered it. And let me just say one last thing. This is really, really important. The people, by and large, that have been the ones that have had the calls, if you will, or had the final say on the Kensington Runestone for the past 100 years and have said that it was a hoax, these are the people that they're not Freemasons. They don't understand allegory and symbolism and code, because I didn't either, and I understand how these guys think. But it wasn't until I truly was able to say, I don't know everything, that I was then able to receive this new information. And at the end of the day, it boils down to this. All these people that have said the Kensington Runestone is a hoax have been trying to tell it what it's supposed to be instead of letting the runestone tell them what it is.
Right. It's a shame they won't listen to your findings. It makes total sense. It's a shame they won't listen to your findings and be open to it, because that might change their view.
Well, no, they won't listen because they already know it.
Yeah, see, that's
they've already made their minds up. They are not able to see it any other way than what they envision. And here's what they did. I can tell you exactly what they did, and they're still doing it. They look at this thing, and it's an inscription carved in part in Scandinavian runes. Oh, this is a runestone. Therefore, it must conform to these conventions that we know with the runestones over here. Well, who the hell said you have to do that? That's
Tony
not
Sweet.
scientific.
Right.
You don't sit there and say, because it's this, it must conform to this. No. You go into it with a blank slate, and you simply document information and let it tell you what it is. And just because it doesn't conform, well, it's not over there. It's over here. It's something different. I mean, that's just a fundamental flaw in the process of investigation. And these guys are running around telling everybody they did a scientific investigation. No, you didn't.
Right.
Not even a little bit.
Right.
Sorry, I get a little carried away when I talk about
come
this.
on,
That
no,
makes me
you
crazy.
don't.
Sorry.
Take a pill.
How about
Take a pill. No, give me a drink.
Yeah, there you
Somebody
go.
give me a
There you
beer.
go.
let's move on to this latest adventure, your latest book, because it is just like Tony mentioned that movie,
National Treasure.
National Treasure.
It's similar to that in that it's an adventure that keeps unfolding, and boom, then you're off to the next place to find the next clue. It's amazing that these things are still out there to be discovered.
Well, you know what? I mean, it's the process of investigation. You follow the evidence wherever it takes you. And, when it comes to the runestone, it took me to the Knights Templar, like, immediately. Like, to them, straight to them, and nobody else but them. And so, okay, well, who are they? And I started to learn about that. And look, it's all falling into place. And really, one of the points that I try to make at the end of this book is, yes, the Templars came here prior to Chris, that guy that never set foot on the continent, that already had people living here.
Credit for it, right?
Millions of people. That guy. Anyway, they came here. And some of the key things that people missed is the ideology that they truly embraced was compatible, was the same as the indigenous people that live on this continent. Let me tell you something. Ain't no way you're going to fight your way to Kensington back in 1362, okay? It's just not going to happen. You're not going to get there unless the native people let you. And they let them because they became blood brothers. And I know how this works because it's the same way we operate in Freemasonry. We're all the same, right? We're all brothers. And we all eat, sleep, shit, fart, you know what else, just like everybody else on the planet. And they recognize that. And that's the way they operated. So they strategically aligned. That's why they were so successful here, and nobody knew what they were doing, because they were operating together with these people they called their blood brothers. That's the thing that everybody missed. I never heard anybody talk about the indigenous people until I thought about it when I was sitting there going, well, gee, if they came over here, they probably ran into the natives. I wonder if they know anything. They know, and they know to this day. But in any case,
hey, Scott, point out the fact that this
amazing story, and it's led me on this amazing adventure. And I got to tell you guys, the best is yet to come.
And it wasn't part of your show. That's the interesting thing. This was like they'd be doing their show,
right?
And on the side for fun, he'd go hiking a mountain and find this stuff, right? This was like just
100%. I mean,
isn't that crazy?
You know, the television opportunities I've had, and I've had a lot of really great opportunities, and I appreciate the heck out of it. I thank History Channel and Travel for the opportunities I've had. You know, I've been very fortunate. The thing that I have not been able to do as much as I would like is to be able to say, here's what I would like to do, and let's go do that. And I got to be honest with you guys. I'm at a point in my life now where I don't have a bunch of time to waste. I want to go after the stuff that I feel is important. Not that the other topics that we looked at on America Unearthed were not worthy. They were amazing too, but my God, if I tried to chase after all the stuff we did, I'd need 10 lifetimes, right? So what is it that I really want to focus on? What is it that to me is the most interesting and what I want to do? And it's this story. And I think it's one of the most important stories. I think it'll affect the facts that will come out of this investigation are going to impact what's happening in the world and specifically in this country today. And I don't want to get into politics, but I will say this. I think that people on both sides of the aisle have forgotten and don't really understand what our founding fathers had envisioned. I mean, we hear a lot about what, on both sides of what they think that they envisioned. I think I know exactly what they envisioned, and we're not living up to that standard today, and I'm talking about all of us. And so one of the net results of this research, when it is done, is people are going to have a true understanding of what those founding fathers intended, what they knew, what they did, that we don't know. And I think it's going to surprise a lot of people, but I don't think it's going to surprise them. I think they're going to go, oh, yeah, that's right, because we've forgotten.
Well, I want to ask you this, Scott, that somebody in the chat room says, why is Mason so secretive? And also, if you have a lot of information that can benefit the planet or America or any political system, why doesn't the Masons step forward and share some of this stuff that maybe the forefathers have that created, and we're getting off track? Why do you think they're not stepping forward, or are they?
Well, that's a great question. Whoever asked the question, and the answer is not a simple answer. First of all, Freemasonry, like everything else, has evolved, especially over the last 250 years since this country was founded. And what I mean by that is when you go back to the founding of this nation, okay, this nation was founded by Freemasons, period, end of discussion. There is no debate on this, okay? And what they did was they had to operate in strict secrecy and in confidence, because if they didn't, it was a matter of life and death, literally, okay? So secrecy back then, and going back in history prior to that, secrecy was mandatory or people died, okay? Mm-hmm. Well, that's not the same world that we live in anymore. It's just not. And Freemasonry has evolved, and other agencies are taking over some of that espionage stuff that used to involve Freemasonry. Now, there's still Freemasons that are involved in these organizations, but not to the level that they used to be. And Freemasonry now is largely about, creating opportunities primarily for men to learn new things, right? We talk about bringing light all the time. Well, light isn't just a code word for knowledge. And that has been one of the fundamental tenets of Freemasonry forever, because the ideology is that if, we make good men better. And the best analogy of that, and we still do that, is two of the symbols that we have on the eastern part of our lodges, which is where the master of the lodge sits. And one is a rough cube stone that is just taken out of the quarry, and it's not, it's not square. It's got rough edges, and that's to symbolize a candidate, a person, a man who is just joining the craft that is basically a good person, right? It's a rough square, right, but it's rough around the edges, and it needs a little molding spiritually, educationally, learning about new things, and maybe physically too. And so we start with this person who's less than perfect, and by going through the degrees and interacting with your brethren, learning and growing intellectually and spiritually, you become the other symbol, the other stone that is what we call a perfect ashlar, which is nice and square and polished and smooth. And it's an allegory for taking that rough person and help making them a better person, so that ultimately that stone can go into the temple, which is symbolic of society, to make a better, more perfect temple, a better society. Does that make sense?
Yes, it has.
And so that's really what it boils down to, but the element of danger just isn't the same as it used to be. So there's a lot of charity work that is done, but the thing about it is there's plenty of educational opportunities that people can pursue in Freemasonry, but you're not pushed into anything. You are exposed to different things depending on how far you go in the various degrees. But after that, it's up to you, and it's up to you to take it as far as you want to go. Now, for me, I love the educational stuff. I love the research. I've delved deep into many aspects of Freemasonry, but there are so many different things you can dive into. You can never learn enough in a lifetime. And if there's one thing I think that we all know, right, is, you're never going to learn everything in your lifetime. I mean, you learn until the day you die. And, man, once you get into Freemasonry, if you dig in a little bit, you're going to learn, man, you aren't even going to scratch the surface. It's really cool.
The more you know, the more there is to know.
Right.
Exactly.
Can I ask you?
The more you know, the more you realize what you don't know.
Right, that's for sure. I want to know about the hooked X. Did you?
Which one?
Well, right. Well, the thing is, I want to know was there any integration into indigenous tribes? Did you know of any in North America that you may have seen used symbols or something that the Templars or Masons or anybody from the European Kensington Runestone that they may have used? Yeah, Templars.
Well, I think what you're asking me is, do we see evidence in the indigenous people today of their interactions with the Templars back then?
Right. Any carvings, markings?
And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. For sure.
Is there any particular tribes that use them more?
Well,
no?
Yeah, and it's not so much the tribes, although there is a tribal aspect to who interacted with them. I mean, geographically, the Templars came from the east, right? And they came down around the North Atlantic, down, Greenland to Newfoundland to Nova Scotia, the St. Lawrence Seaway, and then down to the eastern coastline, down to Cape Cod, New York, Long Island area.
Right.
I mean, that's the route they took. But they spent a lot of time going into the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River and even beyond that. So those are the tribes that were primarily interacted with, at least at the start. But the one thing I think is very important for people to understand is the indigenous people, they have their own secret society. It's called the Medewin. And there are other secret societies in different tribes in different parts of the continent and indeed the world. But it's the Medewin that have the knowledge. And it's a lot like Freemasonry, right? You have to be deemed worthy. You have to be a seeker, somebody who is humble and doesn't already know it all, right? And because if you know it all, you can't learn anything. It's just
Tony.
That's just the way it is.
Right.
So they have their own initiation process. They have their own degrees, and you know what? It's exactly the same as Freemasonry. And that is how they were able to bond at such a deep level. Now, their degrees are, the way they go about the degrees, there's differences, but in essence, it's the same basic thing.
Have you had a chance? Have you had a chance to talk with Ernie Lapointe, Sitting Bull's great grandson?
No, I have not.
I interviewed him in September. I think that's somebody you would be very interested to talk to because he has so much knowledge about a lot of what you're talking about right now and stuff we didn't even get to talk about. But
well, if you could connect us, I would absolutely love that. And, the one thing that we also have to understand and appreciate is that the Indigenous people, they had a pretty tough ride here, right?
Oh, yeah.
And in many ways, they were sold out because, the Europeans that came over here, the Templars that came over here, they bonded with them. They gave them their trust, and it went both ways. And then later on, more Europeans came, and it didn't go very well, right? So, the Indigenous people are very wary, and rightly so. So we have to, I think, in this country, one of the things that we need to do is own up to that. I think somebody needs to step forward and talk about that. And it's not an easy thing to talk about because we're talking about genocide, right?
Right.
And let's be honest, that's what it was. And it needs to be addressed. And somebody should apologize. And I think, that's a relatively simple thing to do. And I think it would go a long way. And all I know is the Indigenous folks, they know a hell of a lot more than we can even imagine.
Yeah, for sure.
And but the other thing that I know about them is that if you treat them the way that anybody else wants to be treated, with respect, you'd be surprised what you get back.
Right.
Hey, Scott, let's not gloss over this adventure book that you have that's so exciting. Can you give folks a taste of what that's about, which path you're on?
Well, I start off with telling people a little bit about some of the stuff that we've done on the show that relates to Freemasonry and the Knights Templar. And actually what I do is I set the table for something I come back to at the end of the book, and it's about a biblical figure that we don't hear about quite as much, and that's John the Baptist. And one of the things that I found so interesting when I became a Mason was that all of our lodges are dedicated to the Holy Saint John.
Really?
Not Jesus. Yeah, Jesus is never mentioned. And I always found that to be really interesting. I actually found it to be refreshing, quite frankly. But I think I know why that is. And that's one of the things that I sort of tee up in the first chapter, and I go into great detail about towards the end. But anyway, that's how I start. I also have a chapter where I update people about, things that I wrote about in my previous books. Any new discoveries, I bring that full circle. I have a summary about the Kensington Runestone where I really lay out, I think, succinctly the various aspects that proves it's authentic, including some of the things I've talked about tonight. Then we get into, then I become a Mason, right? And then we have this amazing discovery of the cryptic code on the Kensington Runestone, which is really a profound thing that you'll hear more about as we go forward. But that's a really important discovery. I also spend some time talking to people about symbolism, about some of the things that I've learned that I think people will really, really enjoy, because when you walk around this world and our country, and there's all these things around us, and you just sort of go along and you think you understand everything, but then once you understand certain elements of symbolism, all of a sudden you see the world in a completely different way. And it's really cool to be able to be enlightened about something and go, hey, look at that. I get it now. It's really a cool thing. And so I think people will enjoy that. Hey, the Hooked X Tau Cross on the Jesus ossuary. Does it get any cooler than that, right? I mean, that thing is incredible. And, that was a discovery that actually happened several years ago. It was like right after I finished my previous book, but I couldn't get it in there. And, you know, I've been sitting on this for quite a while, but it's a profound thing. And what it does is it goes back, and it's one of the strongest pieces of evidence that ties the medieval Templars with the first century royal family. And that's, you know, that was the premise of the Da Vinci Code, right? That Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married and they had children, and looks like that's what happened, right? So,
love it.
you know, people obviously, some people struggle with that, but
you have more evidence supporting it now.
Now we have more evidence to support it, and that brings up, you know, what is the longest chapter in the book is about the Cremona document, which is what I'm going to spend the bulk of my time talking about when I get out to the Expo. But this document I've been working on with the people that brought it to me for 14 years now. And now I finally feel ready to tell the full story. And I still haven't told you the full story because there are pieces of the document that we have not talked about because they're treasure sites. I'm not going to share that with the world right now. This is part of what we want to do is to go see if we can locate these treasures. And let me tell you something, guys. I don't hold out any hope that I'm going to be pulling out gold and silver and jewels and artifacts. But even if we find holes that have been filled in, that's a treasure because that's evidence that something was buried there, and the only way we knew about it is from these documents. Done.
Well, this is another area that's interesting. You know, we know you as a geologist, that people come to you, we found this stone, we found this artifact, but now it almost seems like you're forensically looking at documents too. You're looking at scrolls, you're looking at ancient writing.
Right.
That's
and look,
a fascinating...
the process of investigation is the same. It doesn't matter what the subject matter is, right? You gather facts. If you have enough facts, you might be able to make some interpretations, and if you have enough convincing evidence, then you might be able to draw a conclusion. It doesn't matter if you're looking at runestones or you're investigating documents or it's a murder case, you're trying to figure out who left the fridge open, you know? I mean, it's the same process.
Go ahead. You were going to say.
Go ahead.
Well, I think that this adventure that you go on and these other guys that you went up hiking with, that you met those guys. What was it?
On the mountain, the hunter.
Those guys, they had a discovery of their own that you kind of integrated in with them.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, the Cremona document basically is a compilation of documents that have been recopied probably multiple times over the centuries. Now, the document that we have now, or the parts of the document that we have now, are not 12th century because that's when the bulk of the information takes place during that time period. This is a copy of a copy of a copy that we know that this copy was made after 1856. And you can read about that in the book, how we know that, probably in the 1860s, maybe 1870s at the latest. But in any case, the information is 12th century information. So, but anyway, what it did was it led to a discovery by this guy who bought the document, and it told of Templars coming in the 12th century, led by a Templar knight by the name of Ralph de Sudley, to come to the land of Onteora, is what they called North America at that time, to recover scrolls that had been hidden over here in the 1st century.
In North America.
And they came here, they went to Hunter, this is where these scrolls were hidden, and they recovered some of the scrolls. Later, 500 years later, the rest of the scrolls were recovered in the 1600s and taken to Montreal. But what we were looking for was, one of the guys that inherited the document from the guy that bought it in 1971, Don Rue, he wanted to go up in the mountain because he had another map that the guy had left him, Bill Jackson, that bought the document. And when we were up there, we discovered an inscribed stone by following this map and laying out the points on the ground and we did the laying out on the ground, and then my son and Steve St. Clair went off on a hike, and we left David Brody and Don Rue there to dig up the area because we didn't know if they'd find anything. And I'll be damned, when we came back, they found an inscribed stone, which, we now know where that came from too, but at the time we didn't know. And what's been really fascinating is more and more information is coming to us. And all I can tell you guys is what we've released is fantastic, but what we're still sitting on that we're going to release is even better.
That's a tease right there.
Buckle up and get ready. It's coming.
Well, we just have just a couple minutes left, but we are so excited to see you this coming weekend.
We can't cut them off yet. I got two big questions.
Keep going, but I'm just saying, I'm trying to promote the Conscious Life.
Two big ones.
But Conscious Life
Expo.
Expo.
I appreciate that, and I'm really excited. I hope everybody can make it.
Yes.
And I've got a couple surprises when I give my presentation, and we will be doing, I know, a panel discussion. So bring your questions, and I look forward to meeting everybody. It'll be fun.
All right. Before
we go, I got to ask you a couple things quickly. Do you want to tell people, do you think that your opinion of the Oak Island thing, since you're sort of, I know you have a strong opinion about that.
I have a long history with that show. They've asked me to come on that show multiple times, and I've respectfully declined for a reason. And, it's been 7 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've proven anything?
No.
What have they proven?
That they got
we said
nothing
from the very beginning. And the reason we've said that is because we know where the Templar... Well, let's put it this way. We know there's no Templar treasure there. The Templars never put treasure there.
How about
that? And by the way, does anybody really think that the Templars would put all their eggs in one basket?
Oh, hell no.
No. But they didn't put it there, so they're not going to find any Templar treasure there. And you know what? But it's a really good show for other reasons. It does educate people about a lot of other things, and so I just tell people enjoy it as a TV show.
Right.
I love it.
Just entertainment.
Yeah, it's entertainment.
Well, I think it's interesting that you also feel that whole thing could be a decoy.
Yeah, I do.
That's pretty interesting. That this whole thing they're digging up, they get to the bottom, it'll be like a smiley face, like
right. Right.
Oh, I think they found the smiley face already. I think they're just going
milking it now.
As long as people watch the show, they're making money hand over fist.
Yeah.
History Channel is raking it in, and good for them,
Yeah.
right? It's a business. It's a business.
Yeah.
But
as long as they're not faking any information,
if it
it's
is
fine.
a decoy site, it's the greatest decoy site that anybody's ever come up with, and it's still working right to this day.
All right, my big question for you, Scott, is that you've discovered some things that literally change what we know as recorded history, both for this continent and for religion, let's say that.
Okay.
Does it aggravate you that to know that the whole world may never accept these findings that you may know to be true?
No, it doesn't aggravate me because they are going to have to accept it sooner or later. I mean, look, the truth eventually bubbles to the surface. It doesn't matter what it is, right? And it'll happen in this case, too. I hope it happens in my lifetime. It probably won't, but that's okay because you know what? I know.
And, see, it's great
that's
that you're
enough
fine
for
with
me.
it.
But,
yeah, see, it bothers me.
But you know what? When people, look, how many times have you seen something, and I'm not even going to give you a scenario, where to you see black, and somebody's sitting over there saying, no, that's white. And you go, wait a minute, what are you talking about? It's a white piece of paper, a black piece of paper. And no,
a perfect conversation.
That's just the way people are, and it's not going to change. So that's just the way it is, and that's too bad, I guess. But I'm looking at my screen, the TV's not on, and it's black. It's black.
I've said this before on another show about the Netflix Messiah, where the next Messiah comes down and nobody believes him. Oh, he's a magician. Well, maybe he is. No, he's a magician. No, he's just a con artist. No, he was a troubled kid just wanting to. And it's funny, like right in front of your face, like giving you every sign that this is the next Messiah, and they just don't believe it. And I just think it's funny. Like you said, it's right in front of people's faces, and they just don't want to either want to believe it or they just can't believe it.
Well, Well, look, I that's faith is, and when I have this discussion about a lot of times when it gets to the runestone and the hooked X and the bloodline and Jesus and all that stuff, and I say, look, do you want to talk about? We have to have this discussion from the get-go. Are we talking about faith, or are we talking about real life? Because if we're talking about faith, that's a different discussion.
Right.
And you know what? Some people say, well, you can mix the two. No, you can't. You can't. You're either going to talk about facts, science, and evidence, or you're going to talk about faith. And they're mutually exclusive. They do not fit together. I don't care what anybody says.
Beautiful.
It just doesn't work.
I love it.
Yeah,
All right.
and you have to. And look, once you define the discussion, then no harm, no foul. If we're talking about facts, then don't get offended when I talk about bloodlines and Jesus and Mary Magdalene being married. Right? If we're talking about faith, that's a different discussion. Right?
Right.
Totally.
That's another
Make
2
sure that you
2
know.
hours.
Just set the ground rules, and then nobody gets hurt.
Well, we can't wait to see you. We're going to come see your workshop and panel, and please make sure you go.
And heckle.
Heckle, yes. Bring your rotten tomatoes and all that good stuff.
Well, I'll be over there, guys. I'll be saying, listen to that BS over there.
That's right.
But it's the one and only Scott Wolter, and people could go to his Twitter page, and also I think you still have your blog. Do you still do your blog?
I have my blog. It's been a little quiet here lately because I've been so busy, but I'll get back on there. Don't worry. And I'm on Instagram as well and Facebook. And come to the come to the Expo. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm going to be in rare form. I'll probably have a beer before I get up there. You never know what'll come out.
Hey, all right now.
Awesome. We'll join you.
All right, everybody. This is Tony Sweet, Captain Ron, Scott Wolter on Truth Be Told. We love having you guys in the chat room. Thank you for participating, and subscribe, share this show. I know that always helps us, and we really support you because we know you want to know the truth as much as we do. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.